everyone. Welcome to I have to endure construction sounds for the foreseeable future and have been for the last year. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're not necessarily going to be talking about film too much, although it may come up a teeny bit, but the main point of this video, if you've seen the title, I'm still bisexual? Yes. So if you've been with my channel for a long time, you'll know that back on April 17th, 2016, I posted my quote-unquote official coming out publicly video. I had been out kind of on Tumblr as bisexual for a while, or at least was freely alluding to it and hadn't really made a big grandiose statement about it. And that was the first time that a lot of people publicly outside of that knew of my sexuality. Of course, I had told pretty much my immediate family and a couple of other people at that point, but a lot of my extended family didn't know that. I thought about making a follow-up video to that this past April because it's been 5 years now since I came out publicly, and I've learned a lot more since then. Timing just didn't work out. By the time I realized that the 5-year anniversary was coming up, I felt like I didn't really have enough time to do what I wanted with it. But something came up in the past, like couple days, that really made me want to kind of make a follow-up. So the thing that made me want to sit down and talk about this again is there was an incident a couple days ago on Twitter where Joshua Bassett, who is a Disney star, I think, came out as queer, just very casually in an interview of sorts. There has apparently been some drama around Olivia Rodrigo, who I think is his former girlfriend, versus Sabrina Carpenter, who is / was, who dated him after her. It's a whole thing. I say this, but there was legitimate Disney drama like 10 years prior when I was growing up on Disney about Miley and Nick and Selena and whatnot. The discourse around his coming out, instead of being like mostly positive, was basically just, oh, he was leading these 2 girls on and how dare he, you know, if he knew he was queer, why was he, you know, still dating these girls? And I just, in the entire discourse of all of this, I needed to say, have y'all forgotten that pansexuality exists? And that bisexual people exist, and him coming out as queer does not negate his feelings for either of these women. And also, it's none of y'all's business. That's the adult in me coming out, being like, I hear about this and it's trending and whatnot, but at the end of the day, it's 3 people's private lives that we are not privy to or are as privy to as they want us to be. We don't need to know everything. These are not fictional characters, these are real people. But really the thing that frustrated me the most was people immediately jumping to him just being like only like fully homosexual and not like anything else under the queer umbrella. Like there is a B and LGBT for a reason. So that got me thinking, and that made me realize like, yeah, I should probably be a little bit more vocal about my bisexuality than I was even like 5 years ago in that video. And I've learned quite a few things since I made that video. Some of the things in that video are things that I can no longer subscribe to or I've learned a little bit more about. And that video was definitely very cagey because I, in case you don't know, went to a Christian university, specifically Calvin College. I mentioned this in my last video, it's not a big deal. I was still attending that institution at the time, and I didn't really feel comfortable talking about like my whole journey up to that point, aside from who I had told, because I was afraid of being ostracized at said university. Was worried that that would hold me back. Even just the coming out would have held me back from potentially obtaining a student job during my senior year, which actually didn't end up happening. I chose not to work at the university in my senior year. I lived off campus. Basically, I just decided, especially after the 2016 election happened, that I needed to really keep my school life and my rest of my life, my work life, my personal life, quite separate. And luckily, because I lived off campus, it was a little bit easier to do. This is not a Calvin hating video. This really is not about that. I have a lot of thoughts around the certain discourse around Calvin and its relationship to the LGBT community, but I have made my own peace with that privately and written down all my thoughts, and I really don't need to share any of that because that's my journey and that is part of my journey, as open as I want to be. That's something that I need to keep very private. I will say though, despite going to a Christian university, I currently identify as agnostic. I still have a lot of values that I grew up with, but I don't really subscribe to any particular religion at the moment. Anyways, this video is not about that. So my personal bisexual journey is a very interesting one in that I know I am attracted to women. I have several celebrity crushes that are women, and I have past women in my life that I've known that I had a strong affection for, that I've kind of, in reevaluating things, realized there was a bit of a crush there. For their privacy and for mine, I'm not going to name them. It's been like almost 10 years now since I started realizing that I wasn't exactly straight, and things that happened like 8 years ago don't matter. But the fact of the matter remains, in the last video that I made about my bisexuality, I said that I had not had any experience whatsoever dating a girl, much less kissing one. And that is still true, because not long after I made that particular video, I met my now husband as things would happen. So getting on to my definition of what bisexuality means to me, there's a lot of discourse surrounding whether you should identify as bi or pan and how that relates to the trans community, because bi is a word that implies two and only two. My definition of bisexuality is that bisexuality is the attraction of someone to two or more genders, multiple genders. I know that people use that interchangeably with pansexuality, but to me, bisexuality simply means that gender is not really a deciding factor in whom I choose to seek out as a partner. And so I think the perfect test case for this would be how I met my now husband, because we, as everybody now knows, I didn't tell the truth about this at the time, but we met via Tumblr. As with many Tumblr blogs, you don't necessarily know who's behind it at first. I did know that there was a person behind it. Basically, I didn't really find a physical attraction to them right away. It was more of the like emotional connection and finding someone who gets me. And, you know, meeting them in person, I just, you know, it worked for me. And the thing that I think really signifies that, you know, my bisexuality is what it is if everything had happened the same way, but my husband was a woman or someone who didn't identify specifically as male, that wouldn't have been an issue for me. I still would have fallen in love with them and eventually got married to them. That's that, I guess. If you would like to know some of my, like, you know, celeb crushes that happen to be women, Cate Blanchett is up there. We watched Thor Ragnarok last night. Little Mix has always been up there for me. Charlie XCX, for some reason, kind of does it for me. That Christine and the Queen's collab, Gone, is just chef's kiss. The other thing that kind of plays into me never having had a romantic / sexual experience with a woman is that I also identify as demisexual, which I didn't really touch on in the last video because coming out as bi was big enough on its own. But I am the type of person who will not form a sexual attraction to someone or a physical attraction to someone until I get to know them quite well first. I've been in relationships with two people in my life, and both of them are people who I had known for at least several months prior and had gotten to know them as friends beforehand. Like, the physical and attraction kind of came after that. So, like, I had met my husband, like I said, through Tumblr, and we had talked for, I think, like 6 months or so before I realized that there was a little bit more there. I'm not the type of person who would go out clubbing and, you know, see someone and make out with them and go home with them. I need that connection first. That's just me. And to put not too fine a point on that, it means that like the sexual aspect of our relationship is not the most important thing. The most important thing to me is the emotional connection and the things that we get along with, and like the sexual encounters that I have with my husband are just like an added perk. And that's as explicit as I'm going to get, or otherwise I don't monetize my videos anyways. This is not gonna get demonetized. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I'm still bisexual. I didn't like make a choice about which side I fall on. I can think of a few people in my life who I don't talk too much anymore, who definitely were on the, oh, you're bi, but thank God you married a guy kind of train. And the other thing about my bisexuality is I do think that a lot of people don't necessarily like believe that I'm bisexual because I haven't had any like encounters with women. And the truth is, to dispel any sort of rumor, I don't feel like I'm missing out necessarily. I feel like I've found my person, and I'm so incandescently happy with my person. And I would feel the same way again if everything had happened the way it did, but my person wasn't exclusively male identifying. Going off of that though, we do need to talk about certain types of bi representation in the media, because especially with men, it does tend to get erased. The big example that I can think of in terms of misclassifying people as exclusively homosexual is Call Me By Your Name, because both of the main characters do end up in relationships with women. Timothée Chalamet's character has a girlfriend at the beginning and throughout the story, and his lover in the movie ends up with a woman at the end. And I feel like a lot of people treat those relationships as like false, like these women are beards. And the truth is, they're both bisexual and they both have meaningful relationships with the women in their lives. And that doesn't negate everything, but everyone was like, they're gay, they're gay. Bi people exist. I've already talked about Once Upon a Time a couple times, especially with Ruby, where she had a really significant love interest in the first season, first or second season, I think. And then a few seasons later, they gave her like a female lover, and instead of coding her as bisexual, the creator said, she's a lesbian, she's our first lesbian. I was like, okay, but like, are we gonna negate her relationship in the first season? Once Upon a Time has a consistency problem anyways. But truly, it really just bugs me that, yeah, I guess we're gonna get into this. I identify as bisexual, and interchangeably, I refer to myself as queer as like an umbrella term, but I don't always feel welcome in queer spaces, because I feel like I would love to be part of, you know, a queer community that means a lot, but I feel so nervous about when I eventually tell, you know, people I meet in those communities that I married a man, because I don't feel like they would think that I'm queer enough. So there's certain aspects of queer culture that I hadn't really taken part in. I have gone to Up North Pride in Michigan quite a bit, and we were planning on doing London Pride before the pandemic hit, my husband and I. But there is still that residual, you know, looking up queer spaces to go to and things that my husband and I could go together, but we don't feel like we would feel welcome. And I say we because, and Tim has given me permission to say this, he also identifies as bisexual. So we're both queer people, but we are in a hetero-presenting relationship, and I feel like there's a lot of resentment towards bisexual people who are quote-unquote passing as straight. It does make me feel like I can't really form relationships or friendships with people. It's hard because I feel like I would love to, you know, find queer friends and be part of that community again, but there's always going to be that asterisk of people judging me because I ended up with a man. And there's plenty of bisexual people in the media who have, and ended up in relationships with people of the opposite sex. I think Lady Gaga is a prime example of this. Bisexual women in media in particular tend to be very hypersexualized and portrayed really for the male gaze, to be like, oh, it's hot that they make out with a woman, but she'll still make out with me if I ask her to, you know? It's the whole thing that we don't have time to get into. And then for bisexual men, I think there's a lot of pressure to really like to pick a side, or that like if you identify as bi, it's just another step on the way to, you know, being either heterosexual or homosexual. And of course there's people who like identify as, you know, heterosexual but still like find time to make out with people who aren't of their same gender, and that's a whole thing. But truly, I just wish that people didn't pressure you to come down on one side or the other, because I'm attracted to both men and women. My Facebook profile says as much, and I'm a monogamous person, so I was only ever going to end up with like one person exclusively, and the person that I ended up with exclusively just so happens to be a man that I love very, 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 very much. But that doesn't make me any less queer. So I don't know why people feel the need to minimize that. So there's that. And I say this leading up to Eurovision, where our current winner is a bisexual man who is incredibly proud of that fact. Shout out to you, Duncan Lawrence. Another bi hero that I would like to point out is Amber Glenn, who was our silver medalist at US Figure Skating Nationals this past year. She came out as bi-pan in a sport which doesn't have a lot of queer representation, but I'm super proud of her. In any case, that's kind of where I'm at with my bisexuality and bi representation in the media, among other things. By the time that this goes up, I again will be 26, and hopefully will have just gotten back from going to a cat cafe and petting some animals, because I haven't done that in so long. Thank you guys so much for watching and supporting me for the last however long I've been on YouTube, and especially since I've come out as bisexual. I hope that by talking about my sexuality and my bisexuality a bit more overtly, that I can be, I don't want to, it sounds so pretentious to say like, I want to be an inspiration, but truly I just want like a little girl, teenager, woman at any stage in your life, if you're realizing that you're not exactly straight, but you're not fully homosexual either, that like bisexuality and pansexuality especially is valid, and you know, use whatever label you like. I use bi, I also use queer, and you're not alone. I think that's the big takeaway. You're not alone. In any case, thank you guys so much for watching all the way to the end of this video. I love you all so much. Remember to keep living awesome lives, and I will see you in another video. Bye.